My name is Noel O'Connell. This is my sign name, NC. I was born in Clonmel in Tipperary. Of course, I'm deaf. I'm profoundly deaf in my right ear and half deaf in my left ear. I started school in Dublin roughly at the age of 5. I was profoundly deaf and diagnosed deaf at the age of 4. I'm working in University College Cork, UCC. I work as a postgraduate researcher. So in school, when I started school, like I said, I was age 5 and we used ISL and I learned it from other children. Adults didn't know how to sign. Adults didn't teach us through sign language. I learned all of my sign language from my peers, my other students. And actually there was a policy in the school that there was no signing allowed. And if you were caught, you would be punished. So school policy at that time, and it was a policy not to sign, and they taught my parents not to sign and my family not to sign, which meant that my parents agreed with the school policy. That school policy really affected my relationship then with my parents. Because ISL is my identity and it's my first language. I learned ISL from growing up, and my parents just didn't accept the fact that I used ISL. My family, none of them know how to use sign language, which meant they never learned to use sign language ever. We all focused on speech and lip reading. I was never involved in family discussions. I was left out of everything. Information was always passed on to me, and it was always like a shortened version. So I was never involved in conversations. Because my family didn't learn ISL, it meant that I had to keep my identity private. So mixed with the deaf community.
Tell us about your identity.
So my identity has 2 paths. One, it's about hearing loss, and the other is I use a hearing aid. It means that I can speak. I do have some speech. I don't hear very well. I don't hear sound very well. I have sound, but I don't know what it means. If there's group discussions going on, I really am left out. It doesn't really help. The hearing aid is really more like a crutch that I use, like people would use a crutch to help them to walk. I will use the crutch for sound, not to be involved in a conversation. So it doesn't help with conversing and speech. It just helps with sound. Like you could imagine yourself if you were in a foreign country and you can hear the sound of the foreign language that you're not familiar with. You don't know, maybe it sounds like gibberish because you don't know what it means. You don't understand what people are saying. That's exactly what it's like for me when I'm trying to hear with my hearing aid. It's my choice to be without my hearing aid. My identity is I'm deaf, I can't hear, and that's it. So I choose sometimes not to wear it. I depend on sign language for communication, and I like that way. That's my way. I grew up with people and adults forcing me to wear my hearing aid, and adults still say you should wear your hearing aid. But however, it's easy for them to say that, and maybe it's easier for them to understand me when I am using my hearing aid. But it's a problem for me because, when I wear the hearing aid a lot, I get a headache, my ear becomes sore, so it becomes problematic.
Tell us about your rights and your choices.
I decide, and I can choose not to wear my hearing aid. Other people, I have the right, not other people have a right to tell me. It's my right. The other thing I want to explain about is lip reading. I can lip read. However, most people in society think that deaf people, can lip read from birth. That is a myth. When people are lip reading, they really only pick up about 30% of the speech. So, it's really, really difficult.
How were your experiences after leaving school?
When I left school, I found in society that there was a stigma attached to using ISL and to ISL in general. There was a shame attached to it. So, for example, when I'd go home to my family to visit and my deaf friends were there, I'd always ask, please, let's just sign outside. I found it embarrassing and that there was a shame attached to it. And another example, so yes, I can sign and I go to hurling matches and I watch TV and all of that. But when we're in queues and we're at the turnstile and there's queues entering into the turnstiles and, I'm deaf and I'm signing, my deaf friends and a hearing person, we could look over and see other people mocking us. So I found that hearing people tended to mock people signing. They'd laugh at us and, make gestures, and that's very offensive. And then I found out that that person was a friend of my brother's, in fact. So that kind of thing, that's an example of, a stigma and how it affects us. And as well, in another example of when my landlord found out I was deaf, he actually cancelled my rent or my living there. Another example, when you go into pubs, the barman figured that deaf people were troublesome and actually threw us out just because we were deaf.
How important are ISL interpreters?
I think that I should be able to lip read and no need to be getting an interpreter. People who know me well feel that I don't need to use an interpreter, that I can lip read and refuse access to interpreters. So, for example, if there was a family outing or a family gathering or a funeral, there's never an ISL interpreter there. People feel that there's no need. And I have a struggle with that. And I have to challenge that all the time. I have to convince people that an interpreter is important and it is important for me. If you can understand, people think that if you can understand lip reading and you can, or even see subtitles on TV or subtitles on screens, and therefore there's no need for an interpreter. Does lip reading work well? No. Does lip reading work over interpreting? Absolutely not.
Tell us about the important role third level education plays in your life.
So I started my undergrad in English literature. And secondly, I have 2 masters, one in deaf studies and the other in literature. And now I have a PhD in education, in the sociology of deaf education. All 4 means that it helps me to become more aware of my human rights and the human rights of deaf people in general. I have become more like a sociology judge or a social judge and researcher. It means that my work, the aim of my work, is to achieve equality for deaf people. Because overall, that's based on my experience growing up and all of the struggles that I've had, and that I now understand more about human rights.
What does disability mean to you?
We have different perspectives on disabilities. So disability for me means that there are barriers, but the barriers are in environments and attitudes. They're the barriers. Some people in society think that the disability is inside and internal in a person. But in actual fact, it's not. It's the barriers are in society. It's society in general, external barriers. So, for example, if I say people say you should have a hearing aid, or you should be able to lip read, or you can lip read, So that means you don't have to have an interpreter. So then therefore you can stop signing. Well, then that's a barrier for me. They're the people who are creating the barrier and not me. I see myself as a deaf person with a capital D, which means I'm part of a linguistic minority group and I use sign language, and my identity is linked to my ISL. And it's fixed in my mind. I can't remove it. It's part of me. It's not like a coat that I can take off. It's part of my identity. And I am very proud. I'm a proud ISL user, and I always will be.